Hi, this is Brian Klug with AnandTech, and what we're looking at right now is the Samsung Galaxy S2, we have a UK model in front of us right now. So this is a little bit different from the Galaxy S2 that's going to be launching in the United States, but we're taking a look at the international model today. So before we get into all the software stuff, let's just talk about the device itself. So first of all, you have the 4.27-inch Super AMOLED Plus display. Up at the very top, you have the 2 megapixel front-facing camera. Next to it on the side, you can see the proximity sensor and the ambient light sensor right there. Of course, the earpiece. Then down at the bottom, you have the home button, and then menu and back, if I'm not mistaken. Of course, they're illuminated as well. Yeah, menu and back, you can see. So just like the previous international version, there's no search button, which is a little bit interesting. And no, this is not a trackpad, as I'm sure most of you are aware. On this side, you have the volume rocker. At the very top, you, of course, have the standard headset jack, a microphone for noise cancellation when in calls. And then on this side, you have the power button. And, of course, the micro USB port then is at the very bottom next to the other microphone, the primary microphone. So that's sort of very similar to the other Galaxy S, the original Galaxy S. Yeah, as you recall, basically the volume rocker's in the same place, the power button's in the same place. And of course, what's changed is really the repositioning of the micro USB port and this off-to-righted top placement, and this little slider is gone. It's now just at the bottom. I think on the back, one of the things that's interesting to talk about is how previously this was sort of the battery cover design that pulled up, so the whole thing pulled off and snapped back on. Now it's sort of a one plastic piece that doesn't wrap around, so to speak, but it's just, a flexible sheet of plastic. And notice now that it's textured. So it's got a nice little texture to it, so it doesn't have that sort of homogeneous plastic feeling that the original Galaxy S had on some of the devices. Of course, underneath there's 6.11 watt-hour battery, micro SD card slot, and I don't believe by default it comes with any SD cards at all. You just use the 16 or 32 gigabytes of internal storage. And then, of course, in the middle right here on the top, we got the 8 megapixel camera and LED flash, and, of course, SIM card slot. Some on AT&T in the US, which, of course, Galaxy S2 works on 850 and 1900 PCS. So I think that's a good tour of the device. Of course, the big thing to talk about is thickness, or as they want to call it, thinness, which is a little bit funny. And if you whip out the calipers, you can see that it's just about where they say it's going to be, 8.53 millimeters. I believe the spec is 8.49, and that's really at the thinnest point. There are other parts that aren't quite as thin, and of course this bulge at the bottom still lingers around. And if you measure that, you get, let's see, around 10 millimeters at its thickest. So 10, 9 or 10 looks like. So now if you come back to Galaxy S1, you can really see that basically the thickest part of Galaxy S2 is sort of just as thick as the thinnest part on the Galaxy S1. So this is like 9.73 everywhere, or right around there. And then, of course, the thick part, sort of 11 millimeters thick. So if you want to see the iPhone 4, let's whip that out, just for fun. 9.3 about. And then if you want to just qualitatively compare, you can see how they all match up in a stack. So I mean, really, Galaxy S2 is very thin. It's a super thin phone. I don't believe it's the thinnest anymore. There's another device that's a little bit thinner, but basically this is the thinnest, and most powerful smartphone right now. So it's kind of hard to not give it some kudos, at least for that. So I think that pretty much wraps up the physical look at the device. And now let's talk about software. So basically, the Galaxy S comes with 2.3.3, and there's a leaked ROM right now that's 2.3.4. I'm still running the official in Kies, so it's 2.3.3. But basically, all the TouchWiz stuff I'm about to show is the same with a few minor tweaks, moving between each different firmware. So of course, the Galaxy S2 is running TouchWiz 4.0 as opposed to TouchWiz 3.0, which is what's on all the other Galaxy S devices. So really, I'm pretty positive about TouchWiz 4.0. It's not as clunky or kind of tacky as the other TouchWiz, And you have these home screens. The one on the far left is number one. You can move right, and really it's very smooth. And of course, a lot of this is due in part to the fact that it's leveraging the GPU for composition, which is of course Mali 400. And there's another cool gesture where you can sort of hold here and then swipe back and forth really fast. So that's kind of cool. Of course, if you come into the actual applications, you get sort of the same thing. You can swipe back and forth really fast here. You get sort of paginated tiles of applications. You can add and edit them. Of course, if you tap edit, you can also edit the sort of dock right here with different application shortcuts. Add a page, add a folder. Of course, there's the usual assortment of widgets. If you go back to home and you do menu add, you can add widgets like this, and they're resizable. Like I can add a photo or, a calendar today. Come on. Oops. Oh, apparently those are huge or something. There we go. So yeah, you can get a feeling for, this is sort of standard fare right now in the skinning business, these resizable icons that are sort of custom. And then of course the shade comes up. And you have the usual toggles, which was pretty much the best part of TouchWiz 3.0 in my opinion, was having these toggles finally here without having to go to a custom ROM. So of course you have Wi-Fi, Bluetooth, GPS, vibration, auto rotation, and if you're on manual brightness like I am, then you can also hold here, and then this controls brightness. Let's see if I can do it. Yeah, so swiping to the right is maximum, to the left is minimum. I think that's a pretty good tour of it. You have messaging, which sort of is what you'd expect. The keyboards by default include swipe, and of course the Samsung trackpad. Settings like right here gets a skin. I'm not a huge fan of the Samsung trackpad. If you go into language and keyboard, I like the gingerbread keyboard, which I installed on here, and I sort of like that over swipe too lately. And down here in About Phone, we can also just show, some basic information. I showed you we're running 2.3.3. Over in Display, there's of course this background effect, which I talk about in the review, which controls MD on IE. So you can see that, when I go between these, there's a difference. Oops. There's a big difference in, appearance right here. And that's sort of controlled, again, through this MD and IE control. There's also one in camera. If you go in, that sort of defines the outdoor view, which basically oversaturates and increases brightness. So yeah, that's pretty interesting. But I think that's pretty much all there is to talk about with TouchWiz 4. And love it or hate it, it's actually pretty decent this time around. So the other important software things, I suppose, are the browser, which is super smooth. And it's really hard, to communicate just how smooth it is until you go and actually show it. So let's take a look at that. So I'm going to load up the AnandTech homepage right here, and we're connected over Wi-Fi and all that good stuff. And Flash is turned on, and just look at how smooth this is. This is incredibly smooth. So I mean, the first time around with Galaxy S, they had an incredibly smooth browser, and that continues right now. And this is thanks in part to having a backing store, which is basically just a way of saying a cache, like a big buffer that they render the page into, and then use the GPU to clip and transform around. So you can see just how smooth that is, and it's really basically almost iOS-like if you do things in here. So we can load up something else, and you can see just how smooth that is. And really, I think this is one of the most, if not the most, usable browser out right now. Of course, stock, and it's basically the Android browser, but with that added change. Of course, there's still a discrete brightness control for the browser. The usual things like the way that they arrange your window view. Okay, so this is sometimes what happens, and it's a little bit annoying. You get like a white screen here coming back. And I believe that's sort of one of the only little bugs with the backing store, at least in this build, is that, occasionally it'll give you that white screen. And you can see that it's rendered inside here. It's just kind of not there. That's really the only major problem with this setup right now, is that that's a little bit unstable. And you can see, yeah, it's kind of doing that right now. It's a little bit frustrating. But if we go back here, yeah, you can see it in actual use. It's very smooth, and that white screen doesn't come up very much. And I think that's probably something that's fixed in the newer firmwares which have been leaked. One of the things that I'm pretty impressed by is the fact that Flash is still animated while you're scrolling around. So everybody else sort of pauses the Flash, or it's really juddery. You can see it being, sort of composed atop the page as opposed to, something that's rendered in line. And at least in this version of the browser that Samsung has, it's basically, not doing any of that. It's live, it's there, it works fine. Of course, the browser is also 16-bit color. The rest of the OS is pretty much exclusively 24-bit color, including the gallery. So no doubt that's at least one of the things that's been done to accommodate using the GPU in this manner. The other major things is, of course, the move to a Super AMOLED Plus display, which I touched on before. So, of course, we've now seen 3 generations of AMOLED. So the original AMOLED on the Nexus S, the Super AMOLED, which we got with the Galaxy S, and now we have Super AMOLED Plus on Galaxy S2 and a bunch of other phones, including some that are basically Galaxy S. So what's different between all the 3? Well, original AMOLED was sort of the first incarnation. It was WVGA with Pentile. Super AMOLED brought in optical bonding, so basically the entire digitizer, display, and top glass were all in optical contact, so fewer back reflections. And then what's different this time around is that Pentile is gone. So I don't know if you can see here, but if we load up the AnandTech homepage and you get really close, I don't think that this camera can do it. But basically the Pentile subpixel rendering grid is gone, and in its place we have a real RGB stripe. So I can't really show it here, I guess, but if you read the review, you can see some pictures I took with my macro, and the result is that, again, the RGBG subpixel layout is gone, and instead you have an RGB stripe, so 3 real subpixels per logical pixel as opposed to 2 last time. So as a result, there's less grain. Now, what else is there to talk about? I think there's the camera, which we haven't really touched on. And of course, the camera app is sort of dramatically changed as opposed to the previous generation. The UI is different. As you can see here in the sort of, landscape video capture view, we have a transparent UI on the right, and those elements. If you go into the still photo menu, you can see that, this is sort of still, by default 4:3 aspect ratio. Menu is down here on the bottom left, and it brings up sort of this nice little menu where you get a bunch of options. And of course, there's a bunch of different resolutions. You can go to widescreen if you want, change your white balance, ISO, effects, all that good stuff. There is some anti-shake too, which helps with things. It's electronic anti-shake, not optical. Another cool thing is if you hold down here, then you can get this menu where you can add more stuff to it, like if I decide I want to turn GPS tag on and off a lot. Of course, we can switch to the front-facing camera, which is 2 megapixel, which works well. We can capture stuff. If we, go back into the camera and go to the front-facing, the other camera. Let's go back to rear-facing camera. You can see how fast capture is. Let's see. That's going pretty fast. Yeah, it's capturing into the little drawer there. I don't know if you can tell. So I turned the preview off. Of course, the one of the nice things is that they do have touch to focus. It's not really touch to expose. The exposure settings are still done by here, so we were on center weighted. But you can focus on different elements if you like, by touching. If you go into video mode, of course, the Galaxy S2 supports 1080p 30 video capture. In addition, 720, and then 480p, and VGA, and QVGA, and all that good stuff. So, those settings work. The quality is actually really good. This definitely it records in high profile. So it supports the nice H.264 features, and it records at 17 megabits, 1080p 30. I believe 12 megabits, 720p 30. There's no 720p 60 mode, however. So I think that's a good tour of the camera. And really, it's sort of a nice, clean UI as opposed to last time, which was a little bit bubbly.
All right, thanks again.